Hello everyone, welcome back to Touch the Fire Twice. I'm Joshua, and I'm here today to do an in-depth sniff and comparison review of the recently launched for 2024 Bath & Body Works White Barn Candle Company Apple Crisp Candle. But first, if you're new to Touch the Fire Twice, welcome. My mission here is to share my love and passion for fine home fragrance as an enthusiast, an educator, a reviewer, to inspire you to increase your own fragrance knowledge and understanding, ultimately enhancing the scent memories that you create. If you want to learn more about what I do, why I do it, and how I do it, you can check out my website at TouchTheFireTwice.com, and please do give me a follow over on Instagram, also at TouchTheFireTwice, as well as subscribe here. But for now, let's dig into Apple Crisp. Now, bakery scents are not, I'd say, I guess I do like them. They're not my primary. I like the super sweet confectionery chocolatey things or ones that are almost too literal. I'm not always a big fan of, but as I often say, if something is impressive in the sense that it is incredibly authentic or just delicious, I will really, really enjoy it, or at least kind of respect the authenticity of something. I have another candle review coming up of a candle that I didn't know if I would love because they're dime a dozen at Bath & Body Works as far as pumpkin this, pumpkin that, pumpkin this, pumpkin that. But there's one that is out, not the pumpkin s'mores I reviewed a while back, which you can watch here if you want, but another pumpkin bakery candle from Bath & Body Works that I purchased for the first time this year and really enjoy. All that to say, I do purchase bakery candles. I lean a little bit more towards really loving and appreciating and digging into and exploring the weird stuff or the very unique things versus the dime a dozen fragrances you can find. But I do certainly purchase them, and as you can see on my channel, I do review them, and some of my favorites are actually bakery items when it comes to fall. It wouldn't be fall or autumn without at least a couple of really great apple, vanilla, spice, gourmand fragrances. And this one is a new one. I think as it came out sort of a mid-late fall, like sort of toward the later release of fall candles at Bath & Body Works, it seemed like it could just be a throwaway fragrance. Apple Crisp. They've had caramel apples and apple crumbles, which we'll get to in a minute. Truly my all-time favorite bakery, and pumpkin apples and so many variations of apple over the years. And most of the time, Bath & Body Works, it's fine, but there are some that just aren't great. Some of their straightforward Honeycrisp apples or the champagne apple and honey are just okay for me. There was an autumn apple many years ago in the Slacken & Co. era that I really, really enjoyed, kind of like a Macintosh. But the straightforward apples are not really my favorite at this point. But let's talk about this one. So this collection came out, I actually kind of appreciate the art direction here. First of all, a creamy, glossy lid, very nice, with this sort of the hand-drawn essence, a kind of colored pencil sketch. Reminds me a little bit, if you're familiar with America's Test Kitchen or Cook's Illustrated magazine, they always have on the back, you can see here, on the back of their magazines, they have these hand-illustrated images just of, frankly, various food items or ingredients. And this is sort of in that same vein, kind of very classic, you know, a kitchen in the 1990s could have this as a wallpaper, right? But it works with that autumnal vibe that so many of us are looking for. And getting into the notes, caramelized apple, cinnamon crumble, and sugared oats. So not very unique when it comes to the notes. Certainly there have been many candles that have apple and or caramel and or crumbles and or oats. You don't hear as much, and I really enjoy that. But when it comes to spices and apples and insert gourmand bakery note here, there are so many Bath & Body Works, and they're, again, hit or miss. I have burned this a good handful of times. You can see it's getting a little bit dark here. Happens with the cream-colored waxes, especially Bath & Body Works, that runs a little bit hot. Been a good burner though. This one is very unexpected. I think it's been a surprise hit for a lot of folks who are really enjoying it. Now, getting my nose on it, I almost wish I did have a second one to compare sort of unburned, because you do get a more true essence of the fragrance versus the murkiness here, and the burnt wicks themselves do sometimes slightly change what you get on the cold sniff. However, it is fairly unique. I'd say this is, for me at least, one of the rare times where the candle on cold versus burning is fairly different. There's a lot more going on when it's burning, which is a surprise because a lot of times people say that, and I think it's sometimes just an excuse for poor performance or poor burn or whatever, and it comes down to the strength throw and projection that there's the variation that's being seen. But in this, there really are notes that I wasn't getting on cold that I do get when it's burning, and it happened a few times, so it wasn't just my nose was off or had another candle going the day that I noticed that. But it is soft. It's funny they say caramelized apples, not caramel apples or apples and caramel. What I would like to believe there then is it's not so much caramel, which is going to be a mixture of sugar and some sort of dairy like either heavy cream or milk or butter, but more so taking the sugar that's in apples and caramelizing that itself. So just having apples that are either roasted or in a pan, perhaps there's a little bit of sugar added, but not always necessary, and getting just the natural sugars, the fructose in the apples to caramelize. But I don't really get a burnt sugar aspect to this. So I wouldn't have called out even caramel in this, but a soft baked apple with some spices, certainly some cinnamon, but not your red hot cinnamon, much softer than that. And a bit of what I guess could be nutmeg, because what I appreciate, it's not like a pumpkin spice, there's not an allspice, there's not a clove. They don't call out nutmeg in here, but I do think there's a little bit of that softer side along with kind of like a Ceylon cinnamon, like a true cinnamon. That's gonna be a bit softer than your cassia kind of red hot cinnamon. Sugared oats. On cold, I don't so much get something that's oaty, which is, that's a hard scent. Like if you just smell raw oats, there's gonna be a bit of just a grain aspect to it, but they don't have a strong smell. Certainly the taste and the flavor, the texture, kind of that soft nuttiness that you get almost. For me, oats are just very comforting. And there is some roasted nuttiness in the background here. What I find most interesting about this is that when it is lit, there's almost an unlisted, truly like roasted aspect to it, almost beyond bakery into just gourmand, certainly gourmand. But as I've talked about before, there's gourmand as, let's call it top line category. And then within that, there are sometimes bakery items, there are sometimes non-edible. Something can be gourmand just if it has certain scents in it. Think your vanillas and your tonkas, rich and warm. And then you have things like, candle companies, they're doing Pop-Tarts collections where you're getting, I don't even really call that bakery, you call that confectionery, like manufactured food product, not even baked good, really. But you understand what I'm saying. Like there are certainly gourmands and then there's bakeries. This, while it's billed as a bakery and I would consider it a bakery item, there's something in this that I think there's more sophistication to this than they let on with label and notes, because it's hard to place, but truly the depth of something more to this. And I feel like it is roasted. Maybe it's the oats, because I was going to say like a whole wheat crust, or almost like if you had a dark acorn squash, kind of the roasted gourd feeling. Not that this is pumpkin, this is not pumpkin spice-esque, but there's a darkness, a heaviness to this that I think is more than just apples, cinnamon crumble, which again, the cinnamon is quite light, and the sugared oats, something almost a little savory. There's a baked item I've actually made before, speaking of America's Test Kitchen Cooks Illustrated, a recipe of theirs, which is a pear crisp with miso and almonds. And so it is pears, dried cherries, with a crumble on top. And within the crumble, there is some white miso paste, so fermented soybeans from Asian cuisine. And that imparts a very umami, savory, just a little savory aspect. You can't pick it out. It doesn't taste like you're eating miso soup, but there's something else in that crisp topping that I reminds me of this. It's kind of a sophisticated bakery item. And I really enjoy it. And so I want to compare this to some other Bath & Body Works candles. And I dug into my vault and pulled out two oldies here that I actually think this reminds me a bit of. And then a couple of others just for giggles. So first I want to compare it to my all-time favorite Bath & Body Works bakery fragrance, which is the beloved Slack & Co era Apple Crumble, with notes of bakery, Smith, and Macintosh apples, topped with vanilla crumble, cinnamon, and nutmeg. I could do a whole in-depth review on this one sometime. Let me know if you want me to. It's almost impossible to get this now even on eBay, and it has not come back since this was a repour from 2015. It was in June semi-annual sale. They brought this back. I wish they'd bring it back again. We're going on 9 years now. This is so authentic. I will say a lot of folks say that this is very, very similar to pumpkin apple. Sister scent, but there's a key difference in pumpkin apple that to me makes it null and void to be a replacement for this. It really doesn't take the space of apple crumble for me. You've got a bit of, honestly, kind of like that vanilla crumble, the oats, a good spice, such a beautifully authentic, tart Granny Smith apple, but that vanilla, almost like a vanilla cream anglaise on top of the crumble. I love a crumble, a streusel, so good. Now comparing these two, they're fairly different. I will say the softness, kind of the type of apple in the two is similar, where it's not the generic typical apple you'll see at Bath & Body Works. Of course, this one has Granny Smith and Macintosh. This doesn't specify what kind, but I could see it being one of those sort of less sweet, so not so much your Honeycrisp, not so much your bright, fresh, tangy Fuji. This is more of sort of a soft red or Macintosh apple. And they're similar. Apple Crumble still wins, but they're more sister scents to me, frankly, than pumpkin apple would be to Apple Crumble. Then two other super old ones. One that I first thought this could almost be a repackage of when I got my nose on this and had to dig it out of my vault. and that is an old failed test scent, never went wide, of Farm Apple Cookie. This came out in what is now kind of like a classic test scent collection, which you can actually view my video here back from way back in the day. And this was a test collection that came out in late 2012, the final Slacken & Co. Fall Autumn at Bath & Body Works. Within this was the Elusive Chanteuse chocolate bacon cupcake. There was toffee glazed popcorn. We had the first launch of blueberry pumpkin patch, farm apple cookie, and also roasted pumpkin butter. So really some hits in that collection, and most of them don't see the light of day anymore, though blueberry pumpkin patch did come back in 2023. But farm apple cookie notes are sugar cookie with cinnamon and tender red apple, nutmeg, and creamy vanilla. Boy, this one, this is so good. The picture matches it so perfectly, like a crumbly kind of sugar cookie, not your, decorate Santa Claus stamped out, rolled out sugar cookies. More so a traditional sugar cookie with a nice chew to it, not really, really dry or crisp. But the apple on here, they say tender red apple, and it is soft. The apple almost comes off, there's a dried aspect to this that almost smells like when you have a bag of dehydrated apples with some cinnamon powder on there. The nutmeg brings a depth to it. I would say there's some sort of almost slightly burnt or roasted aspect to this, which I do get similar in that apple crisp. And the vanilla makes it kind of very, very round. It's a warm, kind of almost Tonka-ish vanilla to it. Really, really lovely. I would love to see something like this come back. This really harkens back to when they were very nuanced. Not that there aren't nuanced, amazing scents at Bath & Body Works, but so many seem almost more synthetic. Granted, these are all synthetic for the most part, but they just, I feel like, had a more attention to detail in some of their former scents. Comparing the two, there is a similarity. There's much more strong, true apple in the apple crisp, like a baked, roasted, or as they say, caramelized apple. This is not so much a roasted, baked, caramelized apple. There's no sort of sugary sweetness in that sense in the farm apple cookie. Kind of drier, more powdery, like you have dehydrated apples sort of mixed in or pressed in the top of the cookie, versus a little more towards the gooey, warm baked good pulled out of a cast iron skillet in the apple crisp. But the spice factors, the creaminess of, I think, some sort of perhaps vanilla base in here really is quite similar, which is kind of fun to see. Two other ones. One I wanted to pull out just because this is a random one. I thought, based on name, could it have been this? And that is the 2020, I think, single release Dutch Apple Waffle. Notes on this one: warm buttermilk waffles, baked apple slices, and ground nutmeg. Now I know some folks love this. I think Kent of the Candle Channel specifically, I remember him really, really enjoying this, I think. This one is very much, it smells like a yeasted waffle now that I'm smelling it. Perhaps it's that buttermilk in there. There's a bit of a tang to this. So comparison, they're really not similar. I mean, maybe the apple is somewhat, but there really is a heavy buttermilk, tangy, yeasted, because the yeasted waffle that you actually make the batter and let it sit overnight and then cook them the next day are so good. And the tanginess of the buttermilk almost gives me that in my mind, that kind of slightly fermented richness. And that's primarily what I get in this. Although I do think that nutmeg is that sort of softer spice, not as spicy, cinnamon focused. Some similarities, but certainly fairly different. I do think if you like one, you probably like the other though. And the final candle here, though most folks would not consider this a bakery item, is the traditional pumpkin apple, which we all know. Fairly straightforward on the notes: red delicious apple, fall pumpkin, fresh ground cinnamon, and clove buds. This is that, this knocks you over with clove and cinnamon, and it's that spicy red hot cassia cinnamon, your Vietnamese or Saigon cinnamon, with a lot of clove. This is nice, but this is very much kind of the Joanne Fabrics, similar to the Gala apple and cranberry candle from this year in the Neutrals collection. It is that Yankee Candle 1995 Home Sweet Home style potpourri candle. This is a potpourri candle as it comes down to. The pumpkin, I don't think there's really pumpkin. It really is apple and spices. This could be apple spice, frankly. However, at least doing this side by side, could not be more different, because this is heavy on the clove, heavy on a cassia, spicy cinnamon with some apple, but more of your craft store dried apple potpourri versus a true kind of cooked or roasted apple in the apple crisp. And you don't have the bakery notes of the crumble, the oats, etc. in this. So quite different. The reason why I wanted to compare them though is because so many folks do say that apple crumble and pumpkin apple are so similar that I thought, well, if apple crumble is similar to apple crisp, then and apple crumble is similar to apple pumpkin apple, is there a crossover? So let's just do a quick side-by-side on these, since I've never actually done this before. I mean, I would say the apple is not too far off in each of these. To me though, there's certainly, when it comes to the nutmeg and the vanilla crumble, so some sort of that kind of like either oats or just, brown sugar and flour and butter on top of your apple crumble, in this case muffin on the label. You don't have that in here. To me, it's just the spices that you have in the pumpkin apple. I don't think there's vanilla. It really is spice on spice with apples and more of a dried apple. The spices are same family, but I would say a lot more clove in this, and the cinnamon is stronger in this. There's a similar, softer cinnamon in here. And so for me, because the cloves are really heavy in this, and there's not so much of the creamy vanilla that you get from the apple crumble, sister scents, but it's kind of like they took apple crumble, subtracted one thing, added two things, and they got this that's super, super easy to market. It's nice, but for me, not a replacement. That is my in-depth sniff and comparison review of Apple Crisp. I would love to hear your thoughts on this or any of the other candles in today's review. And until next time, take care.